The deed felt heavier than it should have in my weathered hands as I climbed the last stretch of dirt road. 3 days of hard travel and dust, all leading to this moment. The beginning of a life I had dreamed about for years. My own land, my own cattle, a place where no one could bother me, where the silence of the hills would finally drown out the noise of town gossip and the debts of the past. The farmhouse sat at the crest of a hill, framed by late afternoon light. For a second, I let myself imagine Ruth alive again, standing on that porch, smiling at the start of something new. The thought tightened my chest. I told myself this land would heal me. Out here, isolation wasn't punishment. It was freedom, but freedom has a way of shifting its face. I noticed them as I drew closer. 3 figures on the porch. Women, tall, broad-shouldered, and waiting like sentinels. I stopped in the dirt yard, my boots crunching in the dry grass. Something in my gut tightened. The seller, Marcus Vance, had sworn the place was empty. The tallest of them stepped forward, her shadow stretching across the planks. Blonde hair tied back, arms as solid as oak, eyes pale and cold as a river in winter. She smiled, but it never touched those eyes. "You must be Boon Whitmore," she said. Not a question, she already knew. My name in her mouth made the hair on my neck rise. The other 2 flanked her. One red-haired, her jaw set like stone, arms folded. The other dark-haired, her gaze steady but unreadable. They didn't look like squatters. They looked like they belonged. I swallowed the dryness in my throat and adjusted the brim of my hat. "And you are—" The blonde one didn't answer. She only looked at the paper I gripped in my hand. For some reason, I lifted it higher, as if the inked words could shield me. "This here's my land," I said, louder than I intended. Signed and sealed. Marcus Vance, sold affair. Her smile deepened into something sharper. She stepped off the porch, boots heavy against the ground. The other 2 moved in tandem, like wolves circling. "I don't think you understand," she said. Her voice carried weight, the kind used by people accustomed to getting their way. "This place isn't empty. It never was." The sun dipped lower, stretching shadows across the yard. My heart pounded, each beat echoing the thud of her boots. I told myself I was no coward, that I'd worked too hard for this chance. I clung to that paper like it was more than a deed, as if it could anchor me to reality. But unease sank its claws deeper. This was supposed to be my new beginning. Instead, standing there in the dust with 3 strangers who knew my name, it felt like I'd stepped into a trap. They came down off the porch, boots thudding in rhythm. I held my ground in the yard, dust lifting around my shins, one hand on the deed, the other near the rifle across my back. "You were told the house was empty," the tall one said, close enough for me to see a thin scar on her jaw. "It isn't. Marcus left arrangements." "Arrangements don't outrank a sale," I said. "If you've been squatting, I'll pay for a wagon to town." A dry laugh from the redhead. "We aren't your charity." The dark-haired woman measured me, hat to boots, pausing at the pale line where a ring had been. The tall one took another step. "He promised partnership," she said. "Promised more than that. He tied this land to us and what we built. Men think a signature is the only binding. Some bonds are made with sweat, some with nights a man didn't deserve." "What does that mean?" I asked, already knowing. "It means," the redhead said, "you didn't just buy dirt and lumber. You bought what's living here, the work, the trade lines, the animals, and us." I wanted to step back and found nowhere to go. The dark-haired one drifted to my left, the redhead to my right. The tall one stood in front. A door I'd have to go through. A corral made of people. "I didn't buy people," I said. "Won't ever." "You bought the obligations," the tall one said. "Marcus put them in writing that transfers with the deed. You'll stay. You'll work. You'll share the bed you're given and the profit you earn. In all ways." The last 2 words hit like cold water. My hand twitched toward the rifle before I stilled it. Draw steel and nothing would untangle. "That's not law," I said. "That's menace." She tilted her head. "Call it what you want. The nearest sheriff is 2 days' ride and drinks his breakfast. By the time you came back, what you think is yours would be gone. The cattle need water now. The far fence needs mending now. Law's a long way from here. We aren't. A windmill clicked behind the house. I felt loneliness, remembering how I'd wanted this place for its distance. Distance cuts both ways. What if I turn around, I said, and camp by the creek until I sort this out? You won't, the redhead said. You'll look at the sky and know a storm is coming. You'll want a roof. You'll smell coffee. You'll hear cattle bawl for a hand who knows what he's doing. You don't even know me, I said. We know enough, the dark-haired one said. You came alone. You carry grief like a saddlebag. You want to work until you can't hear your own thoughts. A man like that won't leave when the first test comes. Silence pooled. The tall one held out her hand, not for the rifle, but for the deed. Let me see it. No. One syllable, hard as a fence post. All three stilled. I'll read anything you claim Marcus wrote, I said, but I won't be ordered. Not here. For a heartbeat, the tall one's eyes warmed, not kindness, but respect. Good, she said. Spine is useful. Bring your paper inside. I'll stand on the threshold, I said. Suit yourself, she answered, leaving space for me to climb the steps. I adjusted my hat and followed them, the deed tight in one fist and my heartbeat in the other. The front room smelled with smoke and something faintly sweet. Molasses, maybe, clinging to floorboards. It was neat, too neat, like the kind of order that came from discipline, not comfort. The three women moved with the familiarity of people who belonged here. I stayed at the doorway, hat in hand, boots on the threshold. The tall one, she finally told me her name was Helena, walked to the table and set down a leather folio. She opened it with the care of someone handling a weapon. Marcus didn't leave you only the land, she said. He left you this. Inside were papers, stiff with ink and seals. My eyes caught the notary's stamp, real as any I'd ever seen. The signature at the bottom, Marcus Vance's arrogant scrawl, was clear as day. This is nonsense, I muttered, but the words clung in my throat. The redhead leaned against the hearth. Read it, cowboy, line by line. I did. Each word sank like a stone. The contract described obligations, labor, livestock care, debts owed, and then something else. Companionship. That word repeated, stitched through the clauses. If Marcus defaulted, if Marcus abandoned, then the next buyer of the deed accepted these partnership rights. Hell, I whispered. He tied this place up with blood and ink. The dark-haired one, who had yet to give her name, finally spoke. You think this is a trick. You're wrong. He wrote it down because he thought it clever. He thought binding us like property would keep us from leaving. Instead, he left. The room seemed smaller, the air thinner. I folded the paper, unfolded it, hoping some crease would break the spell. I bought land, I said. That's all. I won't be bound to anyone by fraud. Helena's voice was calm, even measured. Fraud or not, the ink is there. The notary is a man in town who doesn't ask questions for the right price. We tried fighting it once, but no one cared. The redhead pushed off the hearth. Marcus knew men see us as strong backs, not voices, so he left us with this trap. For the first time, I felt my certainty falter. If this wasn't just intimidation, if the contract held weight in town, even falsely, then my deed was dirt. I'd poured every dime into it. Walking away meant losing everything. I raised my eyes from the paper to women. Helena's steady gaze, the redhead's clenched jaw, the quiet watchfulness of the dark-haired one. Not a trick, no, something worse. I tried to steady my breath. You think this makes me your prisoner? No, Helena said. It makes you responsible, same as he was. And what you do with that will tell us everything. Her words pressed heavy. My first instinct was to fight, to argue, to march into town and wave my paper at the sheriff until someone listened. But deep inside, another voice whispered, what if the trap isn't the contract? What if it's the choice between staying and running? I forced myself to swallow the rising panic. Let me see the rest, I said. My voice was sharper than I intended. If Marcus buried me in ink, I'll dig him out of it. Helena closed the folio and slid it toward me. Then you'd better read fast. Paper doesn't burn as easily as it used to. The redhead smirked, but her eyes carried no humor. The dark-haired one still said nothing, though her gaze pinned me harder than any words could. I spread the papers on the table, my hands trembling slightly, and prayed there was some line, some loophole, that would free me. Helena didn't push more paper at me. She closed the folio and set both hands on it like a coffin lid. "You've met my name," she said. "Now meet theirs." The redhead stepped forward, chin up like she'd held a line alone too long. "Ruth." Rope burns laddered her right hand. I'd do the heavy work, teams fencing, the mill wheel. Marcus called it men's labor. Until the creek rose, and I hauled his wagon out while he lectured from the bank. The dark-haired woman moved to the table, careful with her left leg, a limp eye missed outside. "Magdalene," she said, voice steady. "I keep the books. Traded sulfur seed when cash ran thin. Built accounts with the rail agent and the butcher. He promised me a share. He promised all of us." Helena didn't flinch. "He promised whatever filled the day. We built the place anyway." Something shifted as they spoke. Less trap, more story with splinters. I set the deed down. Ruth lifted her shirt at the hip to show a yellow bruise. "Fence post kickback last week," she said. "We don't bruise from arguments. We bruise from work. Town sees marks and decide we're trouble because we don't ask for help." Magdalene slid a ledger toward me. Columns tidy, margins dark where the pencil had bitten deep. "He borrowed in our names," she said. By the time we knew it, credit had moved because of my letters. He used our standing like it was his. I swallowed. "And the companionship in the contract?" Ruth's eyes flickered. "He wrote what he lived. Take what isn't yours and call it mutual. He wanted us bound even if he left. He counted on the next man, fearing the mess more than the truth." Helena tapped the folio. "We went to the sheriff. He laughed and called Marcus clever. Said no court would unwind private agreements for women who already had a roof." "Is that why you stayed?" I asked. "No," Magdalene said. "We stayed because the land listened to us. The creek forgave us when we cut it straighter. Leaving men, he took everything. Work, knowing, dignity. So we outworked the insult. Wind rattled the window. I'd come here to vanish. They'd been forced to show up every day just to keep what they'd made. My fear," I said, "is I'm the next shape of his cruelty, that I walk in with a deed and become another kind of thief." Helena studied me. The hard line of her mouth eased. "We're not asking for another Marcus," she said. "We're asking for a listener." Ruth leaned on the table. "You're scared of being trapped. We're scared of being erased." Magdalene met my eyes. "So listen, ask what we want before you decide what we deserve." Everything in me that was ready to fight sat down. I wasn't safe, not yet, but I wasn't in enemy country either. "Then tell me," I said, pulling the ledger closer. "Tell me what he promised, what he stole, and what you'll accept in his place." They exchanged a look that wasn't triumph, relief edged with caution. Helena sat. Ruth poured coffee. Magdalene opened a second book, names and dates like wounds. I took off my hat and sat, the deed between us like a fourth mouth waiting to speak. For the first time since I'd stepped into that yard, I let silence do the asking. By the time the lamp hissed alive, the shadows in that room had stretched long and strange. My head ached from reading their ledgers, from trying to piece together how one man's charm had turned into chains that bound 3 women to a farm he abandoned. Helena folded her arms, watching me fight the weight of it. "You wanted to see what Marcus left," she said. "Now you know." Ruth leaned forward, callous fingers tapping the table. "But what you don't know yet is what we want. Not another master. Not another liar. Not another man who thinks we're a sideshow." Her bluntness cut through the smoke. I braced for more demands, more traps. But Magdalene's quiet voice caught me instead. "We want what we already built to count. A partner, not a rescuer. Someone who'll take the long nights and the books and the losses, not just the bragging rights." The word sat heavy. I'd come chasing solitude, not a family. Yet here they were, offering something I'd sworn off after Ruth, was lowered into the earth. I rubbed the scar on my ring finger. "You're asking me to stay," I said. Helena didn't blink. "Not just stay. To stand with us. In the field, at the table, and in the bed if it comes to that." The room tilted. My throat dried out faster than any whiskey could cure. "You mean—" Ruth smirked. "Don't play coy. You know what she means. 3 women, 1 man. Not just hands and profit. Flesh, too. Family, if it can be built." Heat climbed my neck. The thought was as unreal as it was magnetic. I should have walked out, told them the whole scheme was madness. But some stubborn part of me, some lonely part, stayed rooted to the chair. Magdalene smoothed the edge of her ledger. "We've seen what it looks like to be used. We're not offering that. We're offering choice. If you can't live it, we'd rather you go than turn into him." I leaned back, staring at the ceiling beams. The house felt alive, listening. The idea of sharing not just work but lives, of knotting myself to 3 people who had already survived hell, twisted in my chest. My old dream of isolation seemed suddenly small, brittle as dry bark. "What if I say no?" I asked. Helena's eyes narrowed. "Then you pack up and ride. But know this, you'll lose the land. You'll lose every cent you gave Marcus. We'll keep building with or without you. We always have." And there it was, the choice laid bare. Cling to pride and walk away broke, or gamble on a union that bent every rule I thought I lived by. I took a long breath. "Show me first," I said finally. "Show me the farm, the water, the stock. Show me what you've built with your hands. If I see it with my own eyes, I'll know if this proposal is truth or another trap." The silence that followed wasn't hostile. It was measuring. Then Ruth cracked a half smile. "Fair enough. Sunrise tomorrow. We're boots you're not afraid to ruin." Helena lifted her cup. "Until then, eat." Magdalene slid me a plate of bread and beans, her gaze steady, as if weighing whether I'd already taken the first step without realizing it. And maybe I had. Dawn burned the frost off the grass when we walked the pasture. Ruth led with a length of pipe on her shoulder. I'd worked places where men threw money at problems. This place met them with sweat and plain sense. "Here," Ruth said, kicking a gate. We followed a ditch to a cedar box she'd built. The creek forked. A salvage will turn slow and sure. "Flood chewed the bank," she said. I cribbed it with stone and split the flow. "Old door for sluice gates. Will spins the pump. That pipe lifts to the pond." She thumped the box. Water coughed, then surged. "Respect water and it carries." Helena stood aside, arms crossed. "Not pushing. Ruth made this after Marcus sold the good pump," she said. "Told her it couldn't be done." "It could," Ruth answered, walking on. We climbed to the pond, clay-lined, banked with sod. Channels ran straight toward the garden and lower field. At the corral, cattle lifted their heads, muzzles rimmed white from cold. Good depth on the calves. Coats clean. Heifer's throat easy? I asked. "Did this season," Helena said. We culled hard and tightened the bullpen. Magdalene led me to a shed that smelled of oil. She unrolled papers on a crate. Trade notes, weighed receipts, timetables. "We fronted hay when a car stalled," she said. "Now we get first pick, and the agent holds our crates 2 days before posting surplus." I traced a column. The numbers marched. "You built float with favors," I said. "Collected interest and trust." She nodded. Trust is currency where banks don't reach. Ruth hauled out a crate of broken fittings and dropped it at my boots. "Losses," she said. "We keep them to remember." By noon, my shirt stuck to my back. I'd mended fence, checked hose, followed the water until the logic of the place fit, like a map I'd always carried. A south fence sagged. The east trough needed lime. But the bones were sound and the heartbeat steady. This wasn't a bluff for a gullible buyer. It was a living thing that had accepted 3 caretakers and was deciding whether to accept a 4th. "They tell you the truth?" Ruth asked, wiping sweat with her forearm. "They did," I said. I looked over the land. Furrows like written lines, cattle like dark punctuation. the creek spelling its own sentence. I've seen men lie with numbers. I added, these numbers work. Magdalene searched my face. Helena stood close enough I felt the ground through her boots. I won't pretend I understand whole what you're asking, I said, but I know good stock, good water, and good judgment when I see it. You built something that deserves protection. Helena's jaw eased. Ruth let out a breath that fogged the air. So, I finished steady now. If this is a test, I'm leaning toward passing it from my side. No one smiled. Not yet, but the wind shifted warmer, and for the first time since I rode onto that hill, the land felt different beneath me. Not a trap tightening, but ground making room. We sat to supper with lanterns hissing on the walls. The food was plain beans, cornbread, a cut of beef that simmered all day, but it filled the air with a comfort I hadn't felt in years. I caught myself listening to the clatter of spoons the way a man listens for music. He doesn't admit he misses. Halfway through the meal, Helena set her fork down. There's one more truth you need, she said. Magdalene rose without a word and fetched a ledger from the sideboard. Not the tidy account book she'd shown me before, but an older, heavier one bound in cracked leather. She laid it between us and opened a page scarred with red ink. These, she said quietly, are debts in Marcus's name. Only he wrote them in ours. Columns of figures stared back, grain, equipment, tools, whiskey. Each line ended with one of their names as debtor. Ruth jabbed a finger at the page. Every nail he bought, every barrel he rolled home, he charged against us. Promised he'd pay it off once the herd grew. Then he left. I felt my jaw tighten. How much? Magdalene didn't flinch. Close to 2,000. Spread over half a dozen traders. They've given us until next month. After that, they'll start seizing stock. The number hit harder than a fist. I wasn't a rich man. My savings were tied into the very deed that brought me here, but I had enough left to make a dent. Still, anger burned hotter than panic. Marcus hadn't just cheated them. He'd set them up to drown under his wake. Why tell me now? I asked. Helena leaned forward, her voice low and steady. Because if you walk into this, you deserve the full weight. We'll lose this place without help. That's the truth. But we'd rather lose it than drag another liar into our circle. Her words caught me off guard. No manipulation, no veiled threats. Just raw honesty. I looked at the three of them. Ruth's fire, Magdalene's quiet steadiness, Helena's unyielding strength. They weren't broken women begging for rescue. They were standing at the cliff's edge, daring me to step up or step aside. Slowly, I pushed the ledger back across the table. I've got some savings stashed in coin. Not enough for the whole of it, but enough to buy time. I'll help pay the debts. But if I do, there'll be conditions. Ruth's brows arched. Conditions? Real partnership, I said. Legal papers that hold weight in town. All our names, equal shares. And whatever happens between us personally, it grows natural or it doesn't. No contract, no obligation. If we build family, it's because we choose it, not because Marcus signs into it. The lantern light flickered across their faces. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Then Magdalene closed the ledger with a quiet thud. That, she said, is more honest than anything Marcus ever gave us. Helena's eyes met mine across the table. This time, there was no coldness, only a sharp, cautious respect. You may be the first man who's spoken to us like that, she said. Then let's make it the last time you have to wait for one. I answered, and with those words, the line between outsider and partner blurred for good. 3 months remade me. A week after we signed the partnership. For names, equal shares, the sheriff grunted, and the first of Marcus's anchors wore a hard stamp. Paid. By the 3rd month, the old ledger shut without shaking. Work gave us rhythm. I took the far fence and bullpen. Helena broke the skittish geldings. Ruth tuned the creek, so the wheels sang after melt. Magdalene marched numbers like troops, weights, due dates, promises kept. Days spoke in honest sounds. Shovel on dirt, Leather Creek, pump sighing, cattle lowing. Nights, the house breathed with us. Town learned to take our coin without its blessing. The grocer's wife greeted the air beside me. A boy asked if the rumors were true, if I slept in one bed with all three. I told him some things don't sell. The pastor's eyes stuck on Helena's branding iron, and the marks Ruth's teeth had left on my throat. He prayed louder after that. Inside our fence, we set rules like posts. Honesty before comfort. Jealousy named before it could gnaw. Nobody owed what they didn't choose to give. Nights rotated without a ledger. I learned Magdalene's quiet meant harbor, not distance. Ruth's sharpness dulled to kindness once work stopped. Helena's strength cost her, and sometimes all she needed was someone to see it. Happiness arrived like weather I didn't trust. I waited for the old loneliness to kick the door. It never did. What came instead was fear of losing what I hadn't believed I could have. When the last note fell, Magdalene's stamping paid while Ruth hooped on the porch and Helena let out a breath she'd saved for years. Something uncoiled in my chest that had been tied since the day my first Ruth went aground. I spoke her name that night. No one flinched. The wind carried it and brought it back softer. We didn't get easier. We got honest. Some mornings a glance between two of them bit me hard. Jealousy has teeth. We learned to say it plain. I'm feeling pushed out. I'm tired of being strong. I need you to look at me. Those sentences saved more than the irrigation ever did. Before frost, we added 10 head. I shored the south fence and carved 4 initials under the top rail. Ruth thumbed the grooves and kissed my shoulder like sealing wax. The pond held, the garden took, the books balanced. Not perfect, not tidy, true. Sometimes I sit with coffee going cold and watch light find the field we saved. I think about the man who rode up gripping a deed like a shield. I think about Marcus, a charm that curdled into cruelty. I won't waste a prayer on him, but I'll admit his treachery shoved me onto this hill at the 1 hour I would have stayed. If I regret anything, it's the time his lies stole. One more season we might have had, one more winter crowded around a table that creaks under hot plates and shared plans. But the hours we do have are ours. In a hard country, that's near to a miracle. I came to disappear. They said, don't. Stay and be seen. So I did. And when the windmill clicks and the wheel lifts water from stubborn earth, I hear our names braided into the work. Helena, Ruth, Magdalene, Boon,